Hello Pixel Pushers, Sadiq Hussain here with another Affinity photo video. Now here you can see I've done a sort of a composite on a graduated background with a border and with a cutout object. Now this is a great way of showcasing a subject away from its background but on a really nice artworked background, something that's complementary to the subject, or just something that's neutral like grey, 50% grey, black, or even white. So that, but to add a little bit of interest, you've got a gradation there using effectively this gradient tool here in the toolbar. So that's what we're going to do. So if I just go through and just show you, that's what we started with. I did a cutout and put it in on its own layer there, and then I duplicated it and made that into a shadow using an overlay fill, and then I put in a background, a new pixel layer with a graduated using the graduated tool, and of course choosing some complementary colours. Being a tennis player, I thought a green colour with a light green in the middle radiating out to a darker green at the back, and then put a border around it as well, just to sort of give it an extra depth to it. So let's go through this one step at a time. Okay, so I'm just going to delete each one of these layers so we can get back to where we were, where you start from. Okay, so that's where we are. In fact, what I'm going to do, just to save time, I'm going to keep the selection because we've done selection videos before using the selection brush tool. We've done that before. So assume that I've done the selection. I've put the selection on a new layer. What we now need to do is duplicate that selection for the shadow. So highlight that layer, duplicate it. We've got a duplicate of it. Now that duplicate, what we want to do, apply a couple of effects to it. So we go to the effects palette, and we want to put a color overlay, which is the one but last one at the bottom. Always click on this gear icon just to pull out that layer effects palette, and we want it to be black. You could argue we might want to have it grey, but actually it's better to have it black and then tone down the opacity later, and that's all we need to do at this stage. But what we could do while we're still here, go to the Gaussian blur, and at this stage just blur that, because shadows are very rarely got sharp edges, so we want to just blur that. Preserve alpha. No, we don't want to preserve alpha because that doesn't give you the desired effect. Okay, so we can just blur the edges, click OK. Back to the layers palette. Now the shadow needs to be behind the original cutout, so we just drag that in between the two. So now if we click on the move tool, top left, we can move that shadow about to where we want it, so depending on where the light's coming from. Okay, so we can just say about there, and then we can drop the opacity of that shadow down by making sure that layer is selected and then changing the opacity down a little bit so it's more subtle. Okay, we're happy with that. And now what we want to do is introduce a new layer. So we click on the new layer, a new pixel layer, and we want that layer to actually be behind both the shadow and the cutout. But for now we're just going to leave it up there, because what we want to do is use the gradient tool. So we're just going to disable these other layers for now, just so we can see this, and go to the gradient tool, click that. And what type of gradient do we want? You can choose solid color, but I like the radial gradient. Click that, and we find the center point, which is easy because we've got the snap tools highlighted at the top, and it will always find the center point. So click and drag it out. Always take it out. If you take it outside of the work area, the document, it means you get more of a smooth gradation. Okay, so what we've got there is a very light grey to a slightly darker grey. So we click on the swatch there just so that we can change the colours. So the centre one, we do want it to be a light colour, but I don't want it to be white. I want it to be green. So if we say somewhere along there in the green part of the spectrum, and we want it to be light green, say something like that. And then the outside, which is this colour here, the outside, we want that to be a darker green, and we just move the colour wheel to the green that you want on the outside. So maybe quite a dark green, say something like that. And then what you can do is just move this midpoint, because that allows you to control how much, at what point does the lighter colour segue, merge into the darker colour. So you can have it predominantly light and only dark in the corners, or vice versa. So whatever works, and I think something like that probably works better for my purpose. Okay. And then all we do is move that layer in between the other two, turn those layers on, back on again. So we've got the cutout, we've got the shadow, it's at the right opacity. Maybe actually we could reduce that opacity down a bit more. So about there. And finally we want to put a border on it. Now you've got to be careful on which layer you put the border. We could obviously merge all these layers together and then put a border on it, that's fine. But if you think about it, that this graduated background layer is the one that goes right the way to the edge. So if we pick that and go to effects and go to outline, which is how one of the ways we create a border around the outline, pick a color, and in fact I'm going to pick a slightly darker green, sorry, a slightly lighter green to contrast with the darker green on the outside of the document. And then just make sure that it's on the inside alignment, increase the size of the radius, and you choose. We don't want it to come too close to the edge of the racket there, so maybe about there. So obviously you choose what you want to do, click close, and that's done, job done. So what we've got there is the original image, background image. It doesn't really matter whether you turn that on or not, because it's obscured by this pixel layer here with the filter, so we can actually disable that. And we've got the cutout with its shadow on top of that. And of course you could put some text there if you wanted to. You could fine tune that. You could even click on that layer, the top layer, and put an adjustment layer to that. Maybe you want to make an adjustment to the curves, so that we can just bring up the brightness a little bit, or the contrast. Now that's doing it to the whole image, if you see. So what we'd want to do is go back to the layers palette and make sure that adjustment layer is aligned to, made into a daughter layer, a sub layer of that cutout only. So that now is grouped together with that. So when we make adjustments to that, it will only affect that layer, as you can see now. So now we can just affect the layer that we want. We just want to bring up the shadow areas there perhaps a little bit. That's probably gone a bit too far. Say about there. I'm happy with that. And so we've now added a curves adjustment to it as well. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Give that a go. Give it a thumbs up if you think that was useful. And also, and more importantly, any comments, suggestions or thoughts, or share some of your own work, that would be really great. So thanks very much, and happy pixel pushing.